Yeah, if you want to take a seat, guys, we're going to kick off again now after lunch. Hopefully you are well fed and watered. Thank you, for that lunch. It was great. If there's any crisps left over, feel free to take them and the water. Lovely. Just let everyone take their seats. Good. Right, good stuff, everyone. Thanks very much for coming back. And hello to everyone watching online as well, if anyone's watching the live stream. Very high tech these days. So the first discussion this afternoon is on the nighttime economy. And all I'm going to say about it is that I hope that through these guys here, we can get more taxis in Belfast, because getting home after a night out in Belfast at the minute is not easy. Now, that's not the only issue we have with the nighttime economy, but I will hand over to these guys behind me to take the discussion further. I will say there's been a little change to the lineup because of our friend COVID, who got the better of Sasha Lord, who was due to come over from Manchester. But I will hand over to the panel to introduce themselves. Thanks, Sybil from Independent Venue Week, for joining at the last minute. And yeah, hand over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming along here tonight. And just to let you know, Lynn, we actually do have somebody from the taxi companies in the audience this evening, this afternoon, who will. And indeed, it does sound like that. I guess just to welcome everybody onto the panel here. First of all, I'm chairing the event. My name is Boyd Slater. I'm one of the founding members of Free the Night, and we have another few guests up here this evening. Holly, sorry, I keep on saying this evening. I keep on forgetting it's daytime. Holly here, who runs Geology Tracks and is also another founding member of Free the Night, and a DJ. And she will probably introduce herself a little bit more. We have Sunil here. Sunil has been DJing for over 20 years now, he tells me. And he also runs Give Us the Night in the Republic of Ireland, and he can tell us a little bit about it as well. It's a campaigns organisation looking to try and push for a more progressive nighttime economy like ourselves. I have Kira Parra here as well. Kira is a researcher for Queen's University. And then at the very end, Sybil, I've forgotten your surname, Sybil Bell, who is from the Independent Venue Week. And I apologize for that, Sybil. And so today we're going to really just give you a bit of an overview of the different bits and pieces that we're doing, what we would like to see for the future, and what we're all really doing about it. And I guess to start, Holly, if you want to maybe give us a bit of an overview of Free the Night and what we're doing and what we plan to do.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Holly Lester. I'm a DJ, as Boyd has mentioned, for about 15 years now. I run a record label, and I'm co-founder of Free the Night. So basically, during the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, which sounds really weird, in 2020, I had a lot of time on my hands as I wasn't touring. And I had just moved to Belfast and had started really thinking about all the issues that I faced as an artist in nightlife in Northern Ireland. And so I gathered a few people together and had a few discussions, and we decided that we needed to organise and something needed to be done. So it didn't actually fully form until April this year. So it took a few months, I suppose, to find the key people to move forward with, and Boyd was one of those key people, as his background is in human rights and campaigning, and that was a key part that we were missing. Just a bunch of artists kind of going back and forth for ages. But yeah, here we are now, and we launched in June of this year officially. And the main reason that we kind of got together and found Boyd, I guess, is because Boyd had recognised a part in the recent licensing rehaul, basically, that was pretty concerning to us. And it basically stated that they wanted to bring, we were expecting basically more progression with this. We waited over 25 years for this, and it was basically not very progressive whatsoever. And it was actually reducing the number of late nights that venues could operate in Northern Ireland. And initially, they also wanted to bring in line drinking up time and entertainment, which would have meant 2 a.m. closures, which is an hour less than we already have. So that was kind of the thing that instigated us to really get together and start lobbying against this. So we've been doing some work on that since April this year, and obviously that ended a couple of months ago. It's now come into law in October. But we did push for something in the review, which is going to be a big part of our work this year, and we hope everybody will be able to help us with it. And that's going to be a review, basically, of the new changes they've brought into place. So that's, I guess that's quite a lot for people to kind of take in at the moment, but that's kind of where we are in a nutshell. And there are lots of other things that have come up in the meantime, things like transport issues, which we've just been talking about, venue problems, lack of spaces, in general, the lack of recognition, for artists and basically creative industries that work at night in the general kind of cultural sphere in Northern Ireland. So these are all things that we are hoping to make some change with. Have I missed anything?
Not exactly, but I mean, as an artist, Holly, one of the other things as Free the Night, when we set up, we sort of thought about this. Okay, the licensing is one of those things that we needed to address, but there were a whole lot of other things that came into play at that point. And I think as an artist, one of those things that we've coined a phrase, which is creative drain, people leaving Northern Ireland. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, so yeah, that actually is a huge one. So I guess my personal story is I lived in England for 8 years. I left in 2011 because there wasn't enough opportunity for me here as an artist, and I was from the countryside as well, and it was really hard for me to break into the city scene. So I went away and kind of made some steps in my career, and it was only now in the later stages that I'm kind of established that I'm able to live here. But even now, it's still something I think about regularly, like if I'm in the right place for my career, because we all know that this isn't a big hub for electronic music in comparison to places like Manchester, Berlin, and London. So you're always kind of thinking if you're better off being somewhere else, which is a shame. And a lot of my friends are in the same position. If you think about all the big names in my scene, sorry, these are the only examples I have, obviously, because I work in it. So people like Bicep, Sally C, Crombie, Orla, all these names, already good friends of mine, they're probably never going to come back. That's the reality, because there just is, there's so many kind of hurdles and obstacles in your way here. And also as a promoter and as a label runner and all these other roles within the industry. So, that's something we really want to change. We want to kind of rebuild things, I suppose, from the ground up, and just rebuild the infrastructure so it works for people like me and also other people who work in other genres of music and do other roles. I'm sure this kind of reflects throughout the whole music scene here in the North.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's 100%. One of the things we've been sort of constantly saying is, wouldn't it be great to be standing in another country where people are going, oh, I want to move to Belfast because it's got an amazing music scene. It's somewhere that artists are supported, somewhere where people can be. So yeah, hopefully we can push on that and really try to sort of create a Northern Ireland where people want to stay and people do want to be. Because I mean, if you think about it, living expenses here in Northern Ireland are cheaper, with the sort of things that are going on with Brexit. In actual fact, living in Northern Ireland might be a better place to base yourself as an artist moving around Europe. It could potentially be cheaper. So, there's lots of positives Northern Ireland holds for people as artists, but is there a scene or is there a creative place for them to express themselves and be able to put on nights and promote themselves? And I think we'll move on to Sunhill here, because Sunhill, has faced these same challenges in the Republic of Ireland. And I think, Sunhill, you can maybe tell us a bit about how long you've now sort of been doing this in the Republic of Ireland, campaigning in a similar way to us, and what successes you've had and what the challenges have been.
Yeah, thanks for that, boys. We started back in the mid-2000s, 2004. Give Us a Night was an emergency response to, at the time, a challenge to the licensing laws at a local level in Dublin city centre by the by the local police, by the Gardaí, who wanted to take away the late licenses in the city. Actually, at the time, they had approached a number of venues to kind of warn them that they would be challenging them in court the following week. That got leaked to the Sunday Independent. At the time, there were a number of us who were on a kind of an online forum, who were kind of seeing what was happening and kind of saying, oh, this doesn't look too good. So I set up an online petition. We formed a group. Within about a day or two, we had a name, and that name got attached to every news story, essentially in the national media that week, which eventually led to the guards backing down in course that week. So we thought, listen, if we can do that in 3 days, what can we do in 3 weeks or 3 months or 6 months? And naively, we thought we could maybe change the licensing laws in 6 months or a year or something like this. Maybe 6 months, actually. We were being realistic, you know, we were being ambitious. But we very soon realized that it wasn't that easy. There was a lot that we didn't know about the licensing laws. We knew that we didn't like the licensing laws. We knew that they were very complicated. The fact that they are so complicated or complex suits a lot of people as well, including solicitors as well, who have to explain to those who own licensed premises how to apply, what the rules are, how they can get around the laws that are in place, how to optimize a particular loophole. So we, you know, our laws have been described as a complex mess, and they really are. They go back to the 1800s. Some of the laws that are in place now go back to the 1800s, and there is another notorious piece of legislation called the 1935 Public Dance Halls Act. So at the moment, and definitely, sorry, I don't want to go on here too much. I could, but I'll try not to. We've been fighting to change those licensing laws for a long time now, and there are a lot of parallels down south and up north as well, because there is a certain kind of mindset when it comes to nightlife, especially anything that goes after normal pub hours. That's something else. That's what is that? You should be at home in bed. What's a nightclub? You know, is music important? You're only going out to have a good time. You know that, and we've seen it during COVID as well. The nighttime industry and the entertainment industry hasn't been prioritized. There's someone at the kettle on there. I think it says it sounds good. I like it, like noise. But really, we've been fighting. You know, it's been a long battle. I think what you have to accept with some of these things as well is that the time sometimes isn't right. You know, so we fought to about 2010, 2011. At which point I had to take a little bit of a step back as well. We never stopped the campaign, but we came back about 3.5 years ago. We relaunched properly. One thing that I felt and that I learned about our government as well is they'll humour you up to a certain point, but really they won't follow through and do anything for you. So I had to kind of get the message at one point to kind of step back a little bit, but then realise that the time will come back. And we were kind of coming off the back of two significant referendum votes that were around marriage equality and also abortion as well. So both of those were signalled a kind of a huge shift, obviously, in Irish society, but also. For the first time in a long time, I felt there were a lot of younger people that were coming to us that wanted to know what the next cause was, what was the next thing they could kind of get invested in. And everyone sort of felt that it was something around nightlife and our freedoms at night. And that, you know, I kind of saw that as not as an opportunity, but I saw it as a time. I suppose it was an opportunity in a sense. Now, in saying that, a lot of people can be fair weather supporters as well. You know, they want to get behind a cause, and that's the thing we have noticed with something like a campaign like this. Your supporter base, it can be quite transient. You know, people come and go, especially even within a group like this. One thing I've got to say for Free the Night so far, it is a solid group, and it doesn't look like anyone's going anywhere. But where we're at now, and just to finish on that, we're now in a good position. We have started at a local level, which meant reaching out to councillors, getting parties to change their policy, to even have a policy. Most of them don't have a policy on anything to do with nightlife. But we've now gone from wanting to change the licensing laws, which was a very specific ask, to now wanting to change everything we possibly can, you know, particularly culturally. You know, we want to change how people view and approach and get the most out of nightlife, you know. So did you want to ask something?
No, I was just going to say, and it seems like that has worked well for you. I mean, more recently, there was quite a bit of information that came out that said that they are going to look to really change these and actually do it. Isn't that right? Like,
yeah, I mean, listen, the current, the two leading parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Fine Gael have got great mileage out of this nighttime economy thing for literally about the last 2.5 years now. Oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And they're putting out their big announcements about what they're going to do. They still haven't done it, you know. So policy is one thing, implementation is the main thing. So that's really what we need to do now. We got a commitment in the programme for government. They appointed a nighttime economy, or they set up a nighttime economy task force, which they appointed me to. So in a way, I'm kind of like the sectoral representative that is speaking directly to the government. So we're in a great place, but COVID has, and now it's really hard to know how soon. There is a little bit of the clock is ticking now as well, because we don't know if our Justice Minister is actually going to stay in that position for as long as we need her to, because she's a great advocate of what we're trying to do. She is half the age of the previous Justice Minister, you know, which makes a big difference. And she's gone out to nightclubs and she understands this, she appreciates it, and she wants to be the person that will overhaul these licensing laws. So let's see, fingers crossed.
That's great. That's brilliant. Thank you, Sonal. So we'll move on to Ciara. Ciara, as I said, is a researcher at Queen's University, and I think, you know, talking about some of these things that we're wanting to do and what we want to challenge is free the night, or what even Sonal is challenging is give us a night. We really feel that it has to be evidence-based and it has to be evidence-led, and obviously the stories of individuals are incredibly important, but, you know, Ciara has been excellent at really collecting that research and thinking about what it is. And so, Ciara, do you want to maybe give us a little overview of what that is that we've been doing so far?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks very much, Boyd. So I suppose I joined Free the Night in July, a couple of weeks after they launched, just to offer my research skills. And for me, like, my research philosophy has always been about finding solutions to problems. And one thing that became very apparent when I started researching or looking for data specific to Northern Ireland's nighttime economy was really the lack of data that actually exists, and any data that is there is quite outdated. So it doesn't really reflect, you know, the modern nighttime economy in Northern Ireland. So, you know, there is a key gap in the research there, and it's difficult, in my view anyway, for policymakers to be able to make decisions on the nighttime economy without relevant data. So again, that's something that I'm hoping that we'll be able to collect and contribute to the campaign. And one of, I suppose, an important pieces of data that we're able to, I suppose, draw on is case studies from other UK and European countries who have been able to use different pilot schemes, different initiatives to make a functioning, healthy nighttime economy. So we started collecting case studies for that, and we'll be using them, I suppose, to brief MLAs and the City Council about what we want a nighttime economy to look like. And one of, I suppose, the milestones in our research as a campaign was our online discussions that we hosted in August. And that was a great way for me to start engaging with actually people who work in the nighttime economy as creative artists, event promoters or venue owners, to really see what the challenges are for them, and for me to be able to think, right, where does the research need to go? So a lot of the issues that Holly had mentioned earlier on was on people's mind, particularly transport. Like, I know you probably know yourselves, it's been out in Belfast City late. It's very, very hard to get a taxi home, and it's just unrealistic really to have no late night public transport. So, you know, the evidence is there that we do need something like that. And I suppose then another concept, or a really important structure for a healthy nighttime economy, is the concept of night governance. And that's a relatively new term in night studies. And it really refers to recognizing that just as the nighttime requires a different set of managing strategies in order for it to function as a healthy nighttime economy. And some of the kind of interventions that researchers suggest to do is to create a nighttime economy panel, and also employ or have governments to employ a designated nighttime mayor or night ambassador, it's also been called, to really help manage the night. And that's something that we would like to see happen in Belfast within the next couple of years. And over 40 cities around the world have this permanent night governance structure in place, and it works. It helps mediate between stakeholders, it helps change policy, and it helps tackle broader socio-economic and environmental issues that really impact the nighttime economy.
That's great, Ciara. And tell us a little bit about what some of the challenges are. I mean, I know we've spoken about this before, but maybe talk a little bit about the economic impact and how that's been.
Yeah, so I mean, there is some data to suggest that nightlife in Belfast from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. generates £7 million per week. Now, that data was collected in 2011, so it's pretty outdated, and it misses the sector beyond 10 p.m. So we're trying now to collect information that we can maybe assess, what an economic impact would look like in Northern Ireland. But it has been quite difficult to do that because really we don't have the capacity to be able to compare, to other cities in the UK. But we're lucky we have some financial advisors who volunteer within the organisation who've been able to help, I suppose, determine projections of what an economic impact should look like. And at the moment, we're still working on the figures, but there is potential, if there was licensing laws extended until 5 a.m. for, the nighttime economy to generate £1 billion per year. So that's a lot of money, and these are not confirmed figures, but this is something that we're looking at the moment. I mean, to actually go and do that research would require engaging with a lot of national statistics, so it would take some time. But certainly from projections, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't be having an economic impact in the same way as other European cities, in the same way as other cities in the UK. So yeah, it's something that we hope we can share in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Ciara. And I guess one of the challenges for us was when we looked at the consultation for licensing and entertainment laws, there had really been no economic impact past 10 p.m. even recognised, and yet the government made a decision based on economics when they hadn't really looked into it. So these are things that we really need to challenge, and these are things that we as an organisation would like to challenge and would also like to look into. But as Ciara said, as volunteering for an organisation, it's incredibly difficult to have the time to maybe manage a whole bit of research like that, which is incredibly detailed when you're talking about the nighttime economy and those businesses that are involved in it. I know we met with Sacha before he confirmed with COVID, and one of the things that he was talking about was about the wider good that the music brings, or creative entertainment in the evening brings to the city. So you've got all of your sort of food outlets, all of those other places, taxi companies that will come to, transport again, all of these things can be supported by the creative industry. And even if you look at cities like Manchester, where, when I moved to Manchester back in 2003, Ancoats was pretty dead. It was becoming, there's a couple of little bars in there. It was a creative area. Now that place is just a creative hub, and it's like the cost of living there has gone up. Everything's happened. Ancoats is now completely rejuvenated, for better or worse. And this is one of the things, with a nighttime ambassador, a nighttime mayor, whatever you want to call it, it has to really be thought out and think about what is of benefit to all of these businesses and how can they all, gain from it. And I guess this is where venues come in, and yourself, Sybil, and how one of the things that we spoke to you about a little bit last night was about reimagining also what venues do and how they work for everybody and how they work for people in the community, and how we can make use of venues like this more.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to see so many people here today. We're just about to start our 9th Independent Venue Week. I can't believe it's been 9 years. In some ways, it seems a lot longer, and in some ways, a lot slower. And in that time, I think the understanding of the role that grassroots music venues play, not just to musicians, but to communities, has really changed. It's really shifted. People don't talk about sticky carpet venues anymore, although I was in one yesterday, and it really was sticky. But I think the goal for Independent Venue Week really was to shine a spotlight on the places that give everybody else a platform. Bands can go on tour and they play these venues to start out, and they can grow their fan base and get bigger, and then they'll move on to bigger venues. But the venues are the ones always taking the risk. They're the ones putting on bands that nobody's heard of, hoping to sell tickets, to pay, bring in enough money to pay the sound engineer, keep the building going, and so on and so forth. So it's the goal from the outset was to be very celebratory. We're not there to campaign or lobby. We're there to say it's a great night out. You can go to a gig 2 nights on the trot in the same venue with the same band playing the same tracks with all the same people in the room, and you'll have 2 very different nights. And you'll have 2 very different nights for so many reasons. And it's great not to be able to quantify those. It's not important to quantify them. What's important is that you can go out and have a really great night. For me, going to a gig and going to a venue is just real life social media. You can see what people are wearing, you can hear what they're talking about, get tips on new music. And that's why it's been really important. And I'm really proud of what we've achieved over the last 9 years. I think one of the things that surprised me most is just one of the biggest upsides of Independent Venue Week is just traveling around the country and going to visit people who, in this day and age, we do so much on email and it's so impersonal. And I wanted people to get off screens for a week and go to gigs in person in venues. That's what IVW is about. And traveling around the country during the week, and we do some wrap-up meetings after, just meeting some people in venues who are not necessarily there for a music reason. There's some fantastic venues around the country, here included, and certainly at the OEA, where there's a lot of other activity happening in the venues. And I think that really caught our imagination. And in a couple of weeks, we're launching our new platform called Yes We Can, which is all about bringing activity into the venues during the daytime. So many places are shut until 4 o'clock till load-in. And you've got all these community groups looking for spaces that are well run, that know how to put things on, that have the sort of structure and infrastructure to be able to host events. So we're launching that on the 2nd of December, actually in Ipswich, out of London. We're very, we've always considered ourselves a national project with a very local feel. And the Yes We Can will cover 6 main areas, which will be early years, the LGBTQ plus community, looking at mental health and well-being, deaf, disabled and neurodivergent community, and then the older generation looking at loneliness and dementia. So it's a really broad range of activities, but a number of our venues are already doing some of this activity in some of the areas. And it just felt by, launching Yes We Can encourage more people to do more activity. And it helps the venues sustain themselves alongside live music. And it really, really helps them to be recognised as cultural hubs.
Yeah, because when you were talking to us about that a little bit last night, and we got you to send over the information, it was really interesting because it's something that we've been saying as well. Because, some of the challenges for venues here in Northern Ireland or in cities like Belfast is the people around it, the residents around it, and how they feel about the venue. And if they're actually making use of that venue during the day, they're less likely to complain about it at night. They see it as part of the community hub, and it would be great to see that. And then, to see maybe older generations using venues and becoming, I guess, in some ways less frightened of what that means or what those other people who use it. So it is, I guess, really important. But tell me this, in terms of independent venues, trying to, support and keep a creative scene alive. Is there support for them, or are we losing venues? Because I know Sunil has spoken to us in the past about losing more and more venues in the Republic of Ireland, which means we've left space for there's a sort of electronic music events that maybe many of us in this room enjoy, or other events. You've got less and less of these venues, and say, I've been to nights in Belfast where they put on great artists, and sometimes you're only getting, they're not covering the cost of their gig, and do these venues get support? Because truthfully, in my opinion, whether it makes money or not, it's really culturally important to have dance floors and to have that culture. It's not about specifically making the money, but if the venue can't make the money, how can they support the cultural scene?
It's been, I think even before COVID, and it comes back to the reason for setting Independent Venue Week up was to say to people, look, these spaces are really important. They're very special. It's not just about developing artists, but it's about developing crew. Everybody you see behind the scenes, or you don't see because they're behind the scenes, they all cut their teeth in these places. And I think it's just been a really important opportunity to raise the profile of these places and the people that run them, because they're the ones that are always behind the scenes. I think when the pandemic hit, it became very clear, just across the board, how fragile the creative and cultural economy is. It's predominantly run by people on freelance or project cycles. There's no set salaries. Even with Independent Venue Week, we have to apply for funding every year, and we're never guaranteed to get it. So it's been challenging trying to, develop and grow something when you don't know if you're going to be able to keep your team and your office and do the work in 5 or 6 months' time. So we're very grateful to Arts Council England for continuing to support us. But I think from the venue's point of view, it is really tough. They're very often not washing their own face. Most venues are not owned by the people that operate the music business from them, and that has become a really big issue. And I think what COVID really did was just really highlight how much love there is for these spaces. The number of crowdfunders that were set up, venues raising 50, 60 grand in 3 or 4 days is phenomenal at a time when everybody's income was being cut back and people were less certain about what they're doing. So I think there's been a lot of learnings. I think it's difficult. I mean, some venues did shut, some venues will continue to close, and it may be controversial to say, but some perhaps should. Not everything is well run and managed in a way that makes it conducive. I mean, you've only got to go touring in Europe to see how differently things are done there and the value that those venues have, and so many are propped up by government. But I think it's going to be a really tough time, certainly coming out of COVID. Lots of shows were happening, but people weren't turning up. Most of the venues were operating at about 30% capacity, partly because some people didn't feel they wanted to go or they weren't able to go. And that has an impact on the venues as well. They're starting to fill up again now. I do feel post-COVID, there is a real desire for people to get back out. And I hope that people use that opportunity for having not had the ability to go out and socialise to realise how important it is. And it's a really great night out, right? If you go to a gig, you're going to meet people there. If you're single, you chance of meeting somebody that's got the same taste in music as you. Don't go to the gym. Just go to a bloody venue. It's what it's all about, isn't it? And I do think there's a lot of love for venues, and I hope really sincerely that people will get out more and support the venues, because if we do keep losing them, and if we lose more, it's not just the fact that the doors have shut, but as you're saying, where do people go to grow their career? Where do you want to go if you want to learn behind the scenes? I think they're just really important cultural hubs. So we'll see, but the best thing that people can do is just go to more gigs. There's nothing more infuriating, is there, than a venue threatened with closure and everyone going, oh, save the venue. Well, where were you? Where have you been for the last year? And that's what we try and encourage with Independent Venue Week. If you go to a gig once a year, go twice. If you go once a month, go twice a month. Just go more often. And that's really, it's a bit the same as supporting the bands. Go and support the bands, buy the merch. It's a whole ecosystem. It's so important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sybil. Anybody else want to say anything? I saw you reaching for a mic.
I just have a little question, Sybil. You were saying it's great how we've realised, as a community, how important venues are, but how can we get the government to realise that?
Change the government, for one.
It's a big question, I know.
Do you know what the problem is? It's a bit of a vicious cycle, isn't it? I won't go down the political rabbit hole because I detest the people we have in government right now. But the problem with government is the people that should really be making decisions about our economy and our community and our well-being are not necessarily the sort of people that want to work in such a toxic environment. And it's, what's going on with Electoral Commission now and changing the way it's going to be harder and harder to vote these. It's streaming, so I won't say a-holes, but the people out that we don't want there. And I think there are moves, there is more recognition in government. People are acknowledging and recognising how important these places are, just not to the scale and the level that we need. And the Cultural Recovery Fund was huge amount of money, and venues have got their own strand that they can apply to Arts Council for. The Cultural Recovery Fund really did make a big difference to a lot of venues. And I think the message is gradually getting there. We're slowly chipping away. But the best way that we can make that noise louder and make them appreciate it is for the venues to be full and busy and producing some of the most incredible talent that we already know it does. It's just getting the people, the decision makers, the MPs down to the venue to see what's going on.
Could I jump in there just as you were saying that? It just reminded me of a case study that we're using with Free the Night, is the city of Helsinki. And in 2017, they went through a major shift in their political parties. More people from the Green Party were starting to get into power, subculturists, DIYers, ecologists, and their actually priorities were to put nightlife and arts and cultural sectors on the map, as well as just broader lifestyle that corresponds to other European cities. And the city of Helsinki owned a lot of real estate agents, and they started to invest. They've been described as cultural incubators. They started to invest in public money into venues and created these cultural hubs that, you know, the city needed. And that actually meant then that private investors started to follow suit, and they began to invest as well in arts and cultural sectors. So, you know, it completely expanded. As well as that, in 2019, their licensing laws completely reformed. Previously, they could only have entertainment licensing till late as 2 a.m. Now you can see that clubs can open until 5 a.m. So, you know, that change in government, that change in policymakers' mind to actually want to put nightlife and arts and cultural sectors on the agenda is really something that I think Northern Ireland will need, and we need more people in power to support us.
Yeah, I mean, I will 100% agree there with Ciara as well on what she's saying. And, you know, I hope that means that you're all registered to vote come May again here. And it is, you know, it's for me, you know, my background is human rights and equality issues. I have been working on them for about 5 years, sort of professionally, and prior to that, probably for another 10 or 15 years. And when I sort of came to this, I recognized that some of the people within the industry didn't have a voice, and they might not have been tackling it or recognizing what way you challenge or tackle government, whether that's through a legislative process or through the courts or whatever way it may be. So I think now we have a really good team here with Free the Night, and certainly we also have support from Sunil and Give Us the Night, and hopefully we have all of your support in this room now, sort of moving forward. And we now. Well, Sunil's going to say something.
Just a little point. It's just to add to what Sybil was saying there. A lot of the time when people get very concerned about venues is when one is shutting down. And I think a lot of the time we can become fixated on just that aspect of it and the doom and gloom of where we're going, the seeing it's getting smaller, venues are getting knocked down, nobody cares. But in some ways, we also get quite distracted about protecting venues rather than thinking about creating venues as well. So it's very important that the types of venues, music venues and nightclubs, that we develop and build a recognition for these in development plans. And that's why it's really important. While on one hand, you want the national governments to recognise and put a good policy in place, really we have to aim this at local councils and to ensure that they have the right definitions there. A lot of the time they value these older heritage buildings and, you know, buildings that architecturally are of a certain standards and quality. And of course you're going to want to protect those. But if you're inside, I mean, I don't care what this building looks like on the outside. I can't even remember what it looks like. Do you know what I mean? I just came in there a while ago. What matters are the people and what goes on inside the venue, you know, and that's something that we really have to get across to policymakers and councils and those who actually put together these development plans, and to ensure that the right lines are in there that planners will have to take notice of when they do make these decisions, and to also ensure that when large-scale developments are being planned, and this goes to like large-scale master planning that could sometimes take 10 or 15 years to materialize, it's very important that we have inclusion for cultural spaces within that. And I think that's work that we all have to do right across the world. You know, it's an ongoing battle. So while we talk about protecting, we have to talk about creation as well. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Sunil. And thank you to everybody here on the panel. So we'd like to open it up for questions, if anybody has any. I know that our friend from the taxi company would probably like to speak about some of the challenges that he's seen. I mean, he contacted us directly about this event happening today, and I think he would like to raise some concerns that he says as well. If you'd like to maybe stand up and say a few words for us, sir, and tell everybody else why they can't get a taxi home.
here, and that's why I want to come here. Every single morning I go in and I look at social media, I look at Twitter and Facebook, I look at all our customer comments about the taxi, and it's all about a fortune, and my taxi didn't show up. So whenever I saw this event was on, I got in touch and said, well, so, inside or phone or answering questions from the side. The reason why I'm interested in this is because, as I've said in a number of videos, taxi industry is very good for all the work that goes on salary. Our systems are second to none. If it rains and done right, we can see that the things will have done right. If there's a concert on and the road to go to 20 minutes on culture, we can see that the things there. As business goes up, our business goes up. As business goes down, our business goes down. We're intertwined. If the hospitality business does well, if tourism does well, if the mining industry does well, we do well, vice versa, because if you kind of people do your revenues and life and you say, look, well, there's actually better than enough, pretty smooth to be a perception that I'm not going to do it because I don't have to home or I'm taking it home. So it's in our best interest to be here and talk about this. Now, to give you the boring bit, prior to the pandemic, we would have 1,400 members. We would have 111 employees per week. At the minute, we have 900 drivers and we do about 75,000 bookings a week. So the same picture in the city was every taxi company in Northern Ireland. I also represent 43 different taxi operators. We're all saying the same thing, now the market is up. And it means that on a Saturday night, we cannot keep up with the us. The main reason for that is that at the beginning of the pandemic, the week before first lockdown, we did 180,000. The first week of lockdown, that's about 8,000 bookings. And the drivers being self-employed, the work wasn't very easy. So through the lockdown, we were and we find ourselves where drivers who are working, and because there's so much demand during the week, drivers who are working are doing well enough working. These days are here 40 hours, Monday to Friday, not 9 to 5, so we struggle to cover the work weekend. If we ask our driver, we can only ask them for self-employed. If we ask our driver, that means that we go to the work. So we've been doing that. We've been trying to rent that to lobby the relax restrictions for people. 85% of the developers by the minute all started for the new current requirements. You get active on it, we have asked for a temporary roadblock to those technical problems. At the minute, it's incredibly difficult to do taxi driver. There's a theory test, there's a practical test, there's all sorts of things on the method. And again, we're saying whether we're a training manager, with a master's degree as a qualified teacher, you deal with the practical. It's not easy. So we need to make economy of taxi more relevant. We're not talking about deregulation, we're talking about the drivers still having to have access and full knowing. We're talking about having to have full insurance and medical and all the rest of it. We just have to deal with the really swift. The second thing, excuse me if I'm going on for too long, I mean, shut up if you want, but it's very relevant. I'm sure a lot of the candidates are out of taxi, or you walk up to a taxi driver or an Uber, you go 50 quid a week. Uber working that's fine. We don't mind competition. I'm talking earlier about but the problem is the limit actually and as a result, those what we do want to see is moderate licenses and weekends, but in charging that moderate license fees, if you're going as far as their minds, we have or might just say, well, I not
I think what you're saying is really relevant as well, because in some of our discussions that we had, we were talking about groups of people who want to come to Belfast from a night out from somewhere like Ballymena or even further afield, and in order to do that, a load of them have to get a taxi together, and there has to be more than 2 or 3 of them going out to be able to afford that to go out. So it's interesting, these things that you sort of bring up, and I hope that the work that we're doing in order to try and increase, those licensing hours and make a more progressive nighttime economy and a safe one, which includes transport to get home, can benefit yourselves as well in terms of.
everyone does it from 5 a.m. It's the same problem as everyone. Yeah. And I do break the line. But if you go on
And certainly, I guess I should make that point. That's one of the things that we've been saying. At the minute, the new licensing laws and the new new alcohol licensing laws, what they effectively do is give you an extra hour drinking, but they don't actually diversify the market. So what they're saying is you who have the same disposable income have to spend more money in our pub, rather than saying, okay, let's open up later. Let's really think about different types of markets here. So you've got those bars or venues that are for singer-songwriters, and then you've got an economy that goes on later into the night, which is going out to those nightclubs. So you do diversify the market, and you do have more options for people to go to. So yeah, I think that covers some of the things that we were thinking about there. You can make one final point. We're going to have to open up for other questions here. Yeah. 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 Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Yeah, so has anybody else got any questions or anything you'd like to ask of anybody in the panel? Hands up or stand up or anything? Yes, sir. Yeah, no, we've definitely spoken about this as a group. I mean, even recently when they've said they're going to extend the time for that bus, I mean, it's still only 12?
Still not that late.
It's 12:30.
Yeah, it's it just doesn't still make any sense. So yeah, we've been discussing it as a group, but obviously that then conversation then has to go wider. And again, some of the challenges here that the departments that you're working with are crossover. So you might be dealing with the Department of Infrastructure if it's something to do with transport. You might be working with the Department of Communities if we're looking at trying to get funding for artists or even venues. And then you might be looking at another department, the Department of Finance, or another one that when it comes to another issue that might, that we might have to address. I mean, the licensing laws sit under the Department of Economy. Where did we say it the other night?
It's the Department of Environment.
Department of Environment, yeah. So again, you've got Department of Environment, Department of Infrastructure, Department of Communities. I mean, already it starts to become really complicated in what you're doing, but you definitely still need to challenge these things. And if anybody wants to help, we're all for it. Samuel, you gonna?
Actually, there was one thing in relation to safety, because I was talking to someone was talking to Joe Cox Brown. You might know her, Sybil, who does some work on nighttime economy over in the UK. But there is a problem, obviously, in the UK, which seems to have moved to Ireland now as well. I mean, there was always a problem around spiking, but there have been, and might as well have this conversation while we're here. But it did come up a little bit. That obviously leads into another conversation around vulnerability, and just something that Stephen mentioned there. Stephen, right? That was down there. Yeah. In relation to people who can't get home, and this again, if somebody doesn't have money to get home at the end of the night. Now, first of all, vulnerability, it's a wide topic, and it leads into other things like spiking as well. But let's just say that somebody at the end of the night can't get home, and they are, they're putting themselves under, they're under threat if they're out there at night and they're in a vulnerable state. I don't know exactly how you get around that in some ways. Could there be a fund? And there are a group called Street Pastors whose job it is. They're a voluntary group, and they work on the street. And they essentially look after people in need. I mean, people who have fallen over, they're too drunk, or they've lost their friends, or they've lost their belongings, or whatever it might be. And in some cases, they need to be able to get home. So this is where we need to hopefully get city councils or the government to invest and put a pot in place where, if you did, for instance, not have any money to be able to get home, or your phone is off, or whatever it might be, that you could go to somebody like the Street Pastors, and they might have money there in place, whether it's £1,000 for a Friday night or a Saturday night. Now, of course, that could be abused, but that would be down to the Street Pastors or whoever would be entrusted with that money to actually be able to get that person home safely. So these are the other sort of little practical measures that we should look to try to put in place as well.
Definitely. I mean, with my other hat on in the other role that I do, I met with the Lord Mayor yesterday and also brought up this issue about how it feels for minorities and women traveling across the city of Belfast, whether that's during the day or in the nighttime. I mean, even as a bloke walking across Belfast, at times I feel intimidated. So I don't know how it feels for people especially from ethnic minority backgrounds in Belfast. So I think speaking to the Lord Mayor as well, I talked about how do we make Belfast a safer city to walk across and a more pleasant city to walk across as well, in terms of just lighting and using the spaces. I mean, I think people feel safe if there are people in buildings around them and there are other people around them. There's many times I've driven through Belfast and it's dead, and like every second shop is just derelict now, and it's like, and that's in the center of Belfast. I mean, the bottom of Royal Avenue is a mess. I mean, what's in it anymore? What are we going to do with that area? And if you look at two other cities, like areas in London, areas in Manchester, what really built those areas up again is the arts. So here
Can
we
I
are.
jump in there, Boyd?
Yeah.
When you're talking about safety, I mean, Amsterdam sticks out at me as a city that's been able to implement different safety pilot schemes at night, which has actually resulted in a reduction of nuisance reports and antisocial behaviour by 60%. In 2017, they funded a 3-year pilot scheme where they had, I suppose, a bit like festival stewards out on the street at night in the high-vis red jackets, and they were able, I suppose, to monitor what was going on. They were able to give hospitality centres training, and with all this collective action over the 3-year period, that was a huge reduction in like antisocial behaviour and nuisance reports. So there has to be, again, a willingness there from the government, from our policymakers, to fund these schemes, because they do work. We have the tools there, but we just need the government to get involved.
I think the problem is so many people in government are the worst offenders of antisocial behaviour. So
Probably right there. Any other questions for us? Anybody? No? Oh, go for it, sir. In an ideal world, we would ask you to look at the evidence and for the government to look at the evidence and make a decision based on the evidence. I don't think that any of us can say, oh yeah, it's a 6 a.m. time. Oh yeah, 4 a.m. is the best time to serve alcohol to. I mean, if I was to do that now, I would be doing exactly the same thing I'm complaining that the government did, a few months ago. Simply, they haven't really looked at it. There are really good examples of how cities progress once you expand the nighttime economy. We can look at that as best evidence. We can look at what they've looked at so far, even in the consultation that happened. And I mean, here's one of the challenges: the consultation that happened on licensing laws recently. There's nobody from the creative sector that responded to it. There's no venues or nightclubs that responded to it. There's no promoters that responded to it. The church and the police responded to it. Now, you could probably guess what their decision is on alcohol and partying later into the night. So the challenge is that now what we have to do is present a really good argument for it, present all the data, and then an actual fact. To be honest, if you ask me that question in 6 months' time to a year, I might have the answer for you, because by that stage, hopefully, we'll have the data for it.
I think something we can say for certain, though, is staggered closing times.
Yeah, 100% staggered
As our
closing times.
friend
Yeah.
from the taxi
But
company.
there's lots of things that we've been thinking about. Does Northern Ireland have the ability to have a 24-hour district? They've just done that in New York. A separate area where you have a 24-hour district. We're thinking about the ideas of what can potentially happen in the future, and hopefully have the data to support that. You going to say something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the staggered closing times, but I think a lot of you maybe are from a band background, and maybe you're thinking, well, we don't really need later licensing. Like, how does that affect us? But the way we kind of see it is that if each of us have our own kind of little pocket in the night, then more people can come to your gigs and more people can come to our gigs after, and everything has their own little, part of the night. So you can go out for dinner at this stage. It's basically like a more European model. Go see a band, go to a nightclub. It's all very interconnected for all of us. So, we really want to encourage everybody, even if you're from like a band background, I don't think this applies to you, to get behind the campaign.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even in those discussions, we had people from the comedy circuit who were saying, look, we're in those venues we're not going into those venues after 12 o'clock at night, but prior to 9, when you're using them, we would like to use them for a couple of hours before. How do we come together and really sort of help each other? And it's great to see, as I say, somebody from the taxi companies here tonight or today. Keep on thinking it's tonight. So look, I guess I will finish by saying, look up Give Us the Night and freethenight.org. Please do sign up, become a member, or it's not charged. You're just a supporter of what our goals or aims are. And what you'll find is we will be in contact with you. We will be asking you to do things like writing to your councillor, contacting your MLA, putting pressure on them, because really, when it comes to making social progressive change, we can shout about it all we want, but the electorate, you contacting your local MLA is what's going to make the difference. You putting the pressure on is what's ultimately going to make the difference, and us making the argument. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you to all of you behind me. That was really interesting, especially from my perspective, where I hadn't heard so much of the debate before. And I also want to thank Stephen, our guest panelist from the audience, because I think coming in here effectively into the lion's den to listen to people, to listen to people complaining about taxes and to take the time to explain the reality of the situation to us, thank you very much. We're going to have a quick 10-15 minute break. The next panel will be here at 2:45. So yeah, toilet break, potato break, whatever you want, and see you in about 10-15 minutes. Thank you.